Hi, this is Elaine Benfield, and welcome to another episode of Herstories. Today's guest is one of my favorite people. I'm super excited to have Ursula Ringham joining Her Stories today. Hi, Ursula.
Hey Elaine, thanks for having me. This is very exciting. I love
Yeah,
it. It's outside of work. We get to as if we're
outside of it.
bantering. Yeah.
Exactly. Do what we do well together. So everyone
Wait,
knows
where's
who.
our glass of wine? I guess it's too.
I should have thought of that. We need to do that next time.
That's
A glass
okay.
of wine. Every time I start Her Stories, I really want to explain to people why someone's inspiring. So I've known you for many years now, and I truly say the minute I met you, you are a force of nature in the best possible way. You have an outgoing personality. Your energy is infectious. Like you just exude life. You have a vision, a drive, and work, but you also have this amazing side, which I tell you all the time about your personal adventure. And I'm inspired by you daily. And I'm so
Hmm.
fortunate to be on your
Wow.
team and work with you and just really kind of take this ride of work, but then also our lives kind of intertwine. So you inspire me every day, and I'm so happy you're here to kind of talk about you. So why don't we kick it
Oh,
off?
Elaine, that's awesome. Thank you.
You're
And I know
welcome.
you're not just saying that, but thank
No,
you.
you know me.
Appreciate it.
I'm pretty honest.
Tell it like it
I'm
is. Exactly.
tell it like it is. So I want to kick off by, who's Ursula Ringham? Why don't we tell everyone who you are and give a little
You
background?
know, I was thinking about that. Who is Ursula Ringham? I think right now in my life with lots of personal things, I'm getting asked that quite a bit. And the one thing that popped up is I truly believe I'm that trusted friend you never knew you had. And what I mean by that, and I'm totally serious, is whenever I meet people, I honestly want to get to know them and help them. It's just, you have that too. It's part of my personality. It's just like I hear other people's story, they're doing things. And in the back of my mind, I'm always like, I want to help. And I truly mean that like trusted. I do a lot of mentoring. I talk to a lot of people and I want them to know they can trust me with, whatever they say, their deepest thoughts. And it's interesting because I go to the mountains quite a bit and I'm skiing and I'll be on the chairlift and I always laughed. It's like I should do a podcast like chairlift confessionals because from getting on the chair with this total stranger to getting off, I can get someone's whole life story, but I'm not going to go blab and talk about it. It's just more human connection. And so I kind of say like I'm that trusted friend you never knew, but then if you want to know like the details of who's Ursula, I'm a storyteller. You can tell right now I love to talk, tell stories. I'm a constant consumer of content. I am a content junkie. I need to be more like reading books. My daughter is a big, what's the terminology for biblify? Is it you're a biblify if you read lots of books?
Yes.
Um, she wants me to get more back into books, but I'm so like social media and everything. It's not that I'm looking at social posts. I'm reading. I get the news, the culture, history, politics. I have a constant need to be in the know of what's happening in the world. Um, Combined with that, I'm a social butterfly. Not that I outwardly at my age go out and, want to go to parties, but I love engaging with people, right?
And
And
look at
then,
all the things we have in common because I feel when I
yeah,
met you, you and I can walk in a room, not know anyone, and leave with 10 people that we now are like, oh my God, they could be my new best friend. And they could, that I think is like an unusual skill. You and I really have that.
how did we get it? I tell you, I don't know. Like, I look at my dad was one of those people too, right?
My dad was
Always,
too. Yep.
was like that. And I think, my daughter, and maybe in the conversation, I'll bring up some examples with her. She's an introvert. And I remember when she was younger, she's like, Mommy, you found your voice. I haven't. How do I do that? And I said, and my voice was as soon as I came out of the womb, right? I had a voice somehow. But, um, but I think that's a superpower of ours,
Yeah.
right? But the thing is, I think over time, you learn from experiences on how to wrangle that because sometimes it's not a good thing. Like my son,
Mhm.
he can be a very big, loud extrovert. And I'd been told by people before, Ursula, you're kind of loud when you're talking. I'm like, no, I'm not. Then I
I
saw
get
my
that all the
son.
time.
I went, holy shit, is that how they see me? I'm like, now I understand with my son, right? But then the one great thing I see with my son is he enters the room, he smiles and he talks. And I'm like, I think that's how people see me. And I instantly fall in love with like, I want to know who this person is,
And deep
right?
down, like it's not superficial. Like you and I can compare notes and talk to, and we know their life story. You and I just,
Yeah.
I remember it. I'm like, oh, I met that person and I know this and I know
Yeah.
it's that to me. We remember that too. Someone,
Yeah.
everyone's interesting to you and everyone's interesting to me in their own way.
And the thing is, like, you teed up in the beginning about, who I am, whatever. And I truly believe we all only have one life. So
Mhm.
you're only on this planet once. Go live it the fullest you can. And, I've had lots of different struggles, which I know a lot of people do with like anything from friends and aging parents and deaths and all this stuff. And all these experiences make you who you are. But what it comes down to and makes me realize is you only have one life. So what's holding you back? I've done some things in my life that I think people right now would be like, "What? How did you do that?" But years later are going to go, "Wow, she took a chance and did something." And that's kind of what I'm doing right now.
Yeah, and I think that really leads into, we obviously met in high tech working for SAP, but, you've worked, I'd love you to talk about your background because to me, you've worked for some of the most recognizable tech companies in the world. And you head up our global influencer program for SAP. You're the lead of our team. But to me, it's like, oh my God, not only have you worked for SAP, you work for everyone knows these names. So I'd love you to talk about how'd you get into it and how did it fall to kind of this career path for you?
Well, high tech was not my career choice. You know, I fell into it. And the one thing I'll say is, I head up global influencer marketing, and I'm old, right? Let's call it what it is.
We're the same,
Back when
baby.
I, yeah, we're the same. But back in college, social media didn't exist. The internet barely existed. We didn't even have really cell phones, nothing like that. And so we had very traditional roles. Like my sister, she went became a doctor. That's what she did. I was international relations. Like, what does that really mean? And what it meant was I love politics. I love history. I love geography. I love studying business and economies, right, of different countries. And I thought, I'm going to go off, I'm going to work for the World Bank. I'm going to work for the UN, IMF. I'm going to be a diplomat, right? I thought I was going to be doing all that. I did a study abroad program, right, in Barcelona. And that was my focus. So people go, how'd you get into high tech? Well, the one thing I'll say is you constantly have to network, constantly talk to people. And it's not a it's for us, Elaine, it's just it happens. It's in our DNA. We just do it. But you have to make a constant effort to just talk to people. It does you never know where to lead. And my thing is like I just like talking to people, smile at them because like I'll be in the grocery store and there'll be an older woman next to me who's maybe having trouble with something. I'm like, oh, can I help you? Because it's the right thing to do. It's the human thing and maybe
And
it's
it's
the
not
one person that's
artificial.
talked to her.
Well, and it's not artificial for you. You and I
It's
network.
not.
It's not like you're
Yeah.
not networking to go, oh, I want to get from point A to point B. You just know it's
No.
part of your relationships. And that's, you
Exactly.
always know when people are like, we want to network. And it's like, oh, what do you want from me?
Yep.
Versus you and
But
I, it's part of our natural relationships.
and if you approach people in a natural way, it'll naturally happen. Like I have a good friend, Karen Anderson, who I went to school with. We weren't friends in school, and now as adults, the group of us ladies get together. We're all from high school, and I wasn't friends with any of them. But we all come from this common place. We know each other with our values and everything, and now we're all about helping each other. And Karen's one of these people. I'll mention something. She says, "Oh, I got a friend for that. Oh, I got a friend for that. Let me connect you." And she's really like the networker. And so the reason I bring this up is just talk to people. So my first job of how I got into high tech was I've been working in food service for Stanford University.
Mhm.
Food service is food service. You're a waitress. You're feeding people food. Not that glamorous, right? Not to diminish that role because a lot of people like that, but that's what I was doing. And after my sophomore year in college, what would happen is every summer you'd come and you'd just talk to Stanford and say, "Hey, is my job here?" And they're like, "Yeah, sure." That year, they said they had eliminated my job. And it's like, oh, that sucks. What am I going to do? Randomly, at the exact same time this was happening, one of my sister's friends called the house. Because remember, back then, no cell phones. My sister's friend couldn't reach her. Ended up talking to my parents. And she's like, "Oh, what's Ursula doing?" "Oh, she's looking for a job." "Oh, we need some summer help. Why doesn't Ursula give me her resume?" I'm at a startup called Adobe Systems. And so just because she was talking to my parents, I wasn't even involved in it, but then I had to like get my resume together. I didn't even interview with her. I interviewed with other people because she wanted to make this like, it wasn't like a bias thing. And so that's how I got my foot into high tech. And it was Adobe. Like back then you're like, "Oh, what's this Adobe? I don't know." I didn't know what software was. I didn't know what hardware was. And my job started off as inside sales. So I was answering the phone, talking to people about upgrading their products. Isn't that crazy? It's just like, it just happens. But if you hadn't put yourself out there and that friend hadn't put herself out there, that would have never happened.
Yeah.
Right?
No, it's such a great lesson because you didn't like you wouldn't have gotten it if it wasn't who you are. Someone helped you get in the door, and that's like was the start. So you ended up going there. So tell me a little bit about the evolution of that and then the next big company that everyone knows as well.
So was at Adobe, was there for about 4 years, and once again, constantly just networking, talking to people. I ended up managing their developer program,
Mm-hmm.
and that was, I had no idea what I was doing, but I was just always someone who's like, I'm going to figure it out. There's always a solution to a problem, a challenge. I'm going to get in there. I'm going to talk to people, and I did a very good job, and I ended up managing that whole program and managing. It was a technical journal, so I was the managing editor of that, where once a month we would come out with this periodical, this actual like magazine that would go to our developer community talking about the latest technologies. And what happened at Adobe was they had some layoffs. I was spared, and the employees that worked for me, I was managing people by then, were not. And they then transitioned me. They wanted me to take on another role. It was in marketing. And, once you were a manager, I was like, wait, this is not what I wanted to do. I want to take, my career to where I want to go. And so people might have thought I was crazy. Wow, you're going to leave Adobe? But I ended up leaving. And what I did was, while at Adobe on the side, in the evenings, maybe once or twice a month, I would do a program called Train the Trainer, and it was, or Teach the Teacher. It was a volunteer program, and we'd bring in teachers from the lower represented areas of the Bay Area,
Mm-hmm.
and we'd teach them about our products, give them the product, make sure that their classroom was set up so they could teach the students. And I loved doing that. And so I decided I'm going to become a consultant. And I started consulting and on Adobe products, got a pretty good gig there, with, different jobs around the United States, flying around. But the problem was there was no like what's going to happen the next day. Like you'd have these contracts, but sometimes they dry up. You have to go get the next one. And so back, I think I was doing about 6 months. And then I got a call from a girlfriend at this all girls school I went to for high school. And she was soliciting donations for an alumni event or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And she's like, hey, what are you up to these days? And I told her, I was at Adobe and I went off on my own consulting. And she's like, well, I think you should really consider Apple. And back in the day, this was back in 98, no one wanted to work at Apple. Steve Jobs had left, but then he had just come back in 97. And she told me that. She's like,
It was
Steve,
the
back is,
transformation time. It really
it
was a
was a
very
transformation time.
yeah.
Yeah. And it was like, Steve's back. There's a lot of energy, but let me tell you, no one wanted to work there. And I'm like, I don't know. But then I kept thinking, gosh, a regular paycheck would be good. I was married at the time. We didn't have kids, but I was like, yeah, let's look into this. So I said, what the heck? Let me submit my resume. They offered me 3 jobs. Can you imagine today going to Apple and they're offering you 3 jobs? That's unheard of.
It's
And
totally unheard of. But even
it's
then,
really unheard of.
I still think who you are and your background are ready. That also is a testament to you because that is super rare, but now it's unheard of. So I
Yeah,
give
but the
that
thing,
credit to you. But
and the thing that was great is I interviewed with a bunch of people and then they each were like, "Ooh, I'd want her for this and this and this."
mhm.
And what I ended up doing was it was going to be a challenge, something I didn't have in my, resume yet. I was going to manage a developer website. I had no HTML experience. Remember, back then we didn't have the cool products
Right.
that made it easy,
Mhm.
right? You
So
didn't have Canva, you didn't have any of this stuff. This was like you had to, program in HTML and do all this stuff. And I said to them, this is the job I want, but I don't have the experience of program. They said, no problem, we'll train you. Who does that? Who in this day and age would take someone like that, bring them in? And so I got up to speed within like a month or two. I was programming, no problem, taking care of the developer website, which had hundreds of thousands of pages, and it was working with lots of different teams to ensure that the templates were correct, what they had, updating all this stuff. And after about a year of doing that, my management came to me and they said, Ursula, you're behind the scenes. You need to be in front of people. And I'm like, you think? And so I transitioned into a role of what's called a partnership manager, more like an evangelist, you might think.
yeah.
And at the time, Apple was just about to launch OS 10, their brand new operating system that was based on Unix. This was again something new. No one believed in Steve
That they
Jobs
could
and this
do
new
it.
vision.
Yeah, that they could
Yeah,
do it. Really, people
yeah.
doubted it. People don't remember that you and I lived in the same time, and I remember people really questioning, and it was like no one believed him at that point, and so it's
No one believed it.
no one
And
believed.
so there was this army of us that were had to go out and convince these big companies, like for an example, Adobe Photoshop. You're going to take the existing Photoshop, programming language, and you're going to basically bring it over to the new OS.
Yeah,
That's a huge undertaking. And so our job was to go out and convince companies to do that. And we each had different companies we were assigned to. I ended up actually managing eventually Macromedia, if people remember that name, and Avid Technologies and Digi Design. And very interesting. I have a lot of other stories. I think we should have like a separate
absolutely.
wine and appetizers, and we'll talk about stuff like this.
Yeah.
But I was doing that, and it taught me so much. Like, as I said, the training wheels came off because I'd been at Adobe, but then at Apple, this was serious. Like, Steve Jobs would have these meetings with we were in a small area. It's so funny to think because it wasn't a big company back then. And he would have these meetings and be like, be thankful you have a job, right? This, we don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And you can look back and be like, at the time, you're like, there was a vision there. You drank the Kool-Aid, you believed in it. Everyone believed in it. And it was a pretty spectacular time. And so, yeah, so I was there at Apple for a good 5 years.
Well,
Pretty crazy.
I love that someone had the vision because you and I both have been had internal facing jobs, and the minute someone's like, "Why would they do that?" and that's the same with you. You're taking your strongest attribute and almost putting you in like this room and going, while you can be successful, it's not what you should be doing. Like I was
Yeah,
built to be external as well. That is just
yeah,
you're putting me in a
yep,
like why I need to, and I feel that with you, like that was a great start for you to be even more external.
yeah,
Um,
definitely,
so tell me,
definitely.
so you ended up being at Apple, and then you talk about like kind of the next
The next phase.
the next phase in transition. And I love this because you and I had two different paths for this in our lives, but we converge back together. And so I'd love
Yeah.
you to talk about kind of what was the next step after Apple.
Yeah, so I was on a rising star at Apple, right?
Mhm.
Fantastic. People today would be like, "Why the hell did you leave? What the heck's going on?" Well, came knocking at the door, I decided to have kids.
Yeah.
And so I left Apple after 5 years to be a stay-at-home mom for 8 years. And I know a lot of people go, "Oh yeah, you had Apple money." This was before the iPhone. So no, this was a decision that my husband and I made at the time. That's like, this is what I wanted to do. My mother was a stay-at-home mom, but then later in life, she became a real estate agent and she was working. So I got to see her being,
Yeah.
combination stay-at-home mom when I was very young. I was the youngest of three, and she started working. Do you remember the terminology latchkey kid?
I
I
do
was
remember.
I was a latchkey kid, and this for
And
all of you that are
anyone
younger.
that, yeah, I was gonna say anyone who is younger than us, it meant that technically you had a key to get into your own home. And I had so many friends. I didn't have that. My mom was a stay-at-home mom and just never worked. Did volunteering and whatnot, but
Yeah,
it was the term was really latchkey because you had the key to get home, and it was like
yeah,
into your house. So that's
yep.
amazing. That's
And
amazing.
so so I'd be dropped off by whoever from school because my mom was working and my dad, and I would be a latchkey kid. And so I just remember though when I was very young, I loved what my mom would do. She was an artist because she used to be a teacher
Mhm.
before she stayed at home, and we would do all these projects together and stuff. And I wanted to do it with my kids. I know I was very fortunate and lucky to be able to do that.
Yeah,
But the one thing I'll say is like raising kids is the hardest job in the world. I
hard.
tell my kids, I tell all these young gals and guys that I mentor, I'm just like, do not have kids until you're ready. Just don't,
Yeah.
because
And
you
if
don't
you
have
don't
to
want
rush.
them, don't have them. Like,
And if you don't want kids, that's fine. You don't have to have kids, you know.
well, and
But the one,
I do want to add one thing. Like, I do feel that so many people think, oh, stay at home mom. You're not a stay at home mom where it's like, oh, you had a nanny and someone took care of your kids and you were going to go play tennis. You were so involved with volunteering and the different activities, and your kids had culture and they had art. What you did to me is that's a stay at home mom that is so engaged. Now, I'm not discrediting women that juggle all of it, but to me, I think there's a negative connotation where you weren't sitting at home. You were exploring and teaching your kids for years to launch,
Yeah.
and
No,
just
I was. And, I'd say the one thing that I did is I joined a Las Madres, which is a mom's group.
mhm.
And it actually stemmed from I had done some prenatal yoga and met two gals from that. And we went and then joined this Las Madres. And that was a really good community in my neighborhood that you just had these moms. And of course, there were like a couple moms that we would then go off and do stuff together. And it was a very nice time in my life, those first like 3 to 5 years of them just being there. And, the fun thing is like people say, how did you transition,
Yeah,
from being in high tech and then being a mom? And it's like, you know, except for the sleep part, I had no problem. I'm a chameleon because, as I said, I have one life and you don't know what life's going to throw at you, but you need to keep moving forward. And I've
and I think
always
it's
had that.
chapters. Like I think you have
Yeah.
transitions of, you and I've talked like it's you have a different that was a chapter of yours. And then when that chapter
Yes.
you're like, okay, it's time for me to do the next chapter. And you're like, your
Yep.
kids are at a good age. So
Yeah.
then yeah,
But yeah, I'll tell you, like when I was at home, I actually did quite a bit. And I
yeah.
think you're going to hit on this. So sorry if I
No,
like butt it in.
no, but I'd love you to I'll highlight because that to me is you were you were so active, which then led into kind of your next phase. But tell us about
Yeah.
some of the stuff that you did.
Yeah, so besides juggling the kids and all that kind of stuff,
Mhm.
so I talked about this all girls school that I went to for high school. I ended up wanting to volunteer for that because I was at a time in my life where I'm like, I wanted to make reconnections. And I mentioned this one gal, Karen. I wasn't friends with her in school, but then now being an adult, a parent, we reconnected through this alumni association. So I joined that as a volunteer to do events. I mean, come on, Elaine, we could do this in our sleep. Like, oh, let's have a wine and cheese party. Yay. How fun is that?
All day long.
And then after a couple years doing that, they asked me to be president of the Alumni Association. I had never done anything like that. I'm like, how hard could it be? Let me do it. And I loved it because it was putting together a strategy. I had a group of probably 12 volunteers, and we had different, where there were different things that we were doing for, representing the school, representing our alums. I think we had like 35,000 alums uh, worldwide. It was a very small school, been around for 100 some years. And part of this responsibility was I had a seat on the board of trustees. That was fascinating because the board of trustees, the school I went to, which I was very lucky to attend, has some of the wealthiest parents in the area. I mean, the founder of NetSuite, his wife was on the board, right? This is like this billionaire. And it's fascinating when you bring all these people together because the whole goal is to benefit the girls' school and what we're doing, and let's make this better. And also like inclusion. How can we have programs where we can bring in, girls from other lower economic, disadvantaged areas? Like it was very communal, exciting time. So I did that for like 5 or 6 years, and that was a commitment. I mean, I was not being paid, it was volunteer, but I loved it. So I was doing that. And then I was also, I headed up my kids' reading program at their school. So the school I went to, public school, and they didn't have enough resources to do like enrichment programs. And so there was a program called Project Cornerstone. Some of you might have heard about that. I think it's a nationwide um, uh, a program. And our school had been doing it for a number of years. And I was part of the community of parents that would come in. And what you do is once a month, you'd read to the students in the classroom, and then you do a little fun exercise, and then you'd send home a little flyer telling the parents what you did. So then I became president, took over that. There's like 100 some parents that you have to manage. And I took the flyer, and with my Adobe skills, I made it like gorgeous. I put some illustrations in there. I put the book jacket, I put like kind of, I told the story. What's the point? Like, what are we doing this for? What is the book teaching? And the books were always about not bullying, being a good friend,
Yeah.
things like that. And I did that just because I'm like, it's the right thing to do. It was fun to do.
Giving
And
back, you have that. You want to give your skills back to your community and to help
yeah,
others. That's
and I
amazing.
tell you, the greatest part was walking in the classroom, and the kids loved it. And I got to know the kids. They would see me around the neighborhood. Oh, it's Miss Ursula. And it led into so many things. Like I remember when each of my kids graduated from fifth grade, I told the teacher, oh, I'm jumping ahead, but I'm kind of jumping ahead of the story. But basically, I told the teachers I know a lot about social media. Dun dun dun. I'm giving a foreshadow of what we're going to talk about. And I said, let me come in and give a social media 101 class to these kids and give them the tools they're going to need because they're going into middle school. And so it's like I'm always trying to do something like that. And it's volunteer. It's like, because who else is going to do it? I got to just go in and help.
Well, go in and can help, but it's also you're helping with skills that are such life lessons for, kids. I'm sure were like, what is social media? And it's like, here you are, an expert to help those children and with, learning in the books and everything. So you ended up, you, as we talked about, you were very busy during the kids, years, super involved, super,
Yeah, didn't
loved
even
all
say
of
that
it.
I was their soccer coach too.
Oh yeah, I mean, add that into the mix. Like it's like you had multiple full time jobs.
Yeah.
But then how did you make that decision where you're like, okay, because I think that's hard for women to go back and be like, and men, but like just say, okay, I think I've had my time. My kids are at a great place. I feel comfortable with going back to full time work. So how did that come about?
So so how it came about was it was my daughter. So my daughter right now, she is 19. She is a freshman at University of Washington. Go Huskies.
And
And her
give her synopsis of who she is from a sports scenario, because that's
well, okay, that's a whole other thing,
well,
but
just
I'll give
we'll have to have a whole
okay,
conversation about that.
a conversation about that. But the one thing I want to emphasize is she is basically astrophysics, right? She loves, astronomy, physics, math. She just gets it. And rewinding back to your question of why did I decide to go back in second grade, she came to me and is like, Mommy, I love math. And she's an introvert. So keep in mind, she's an introvert. She does, she's not the extrovert. She's complete opposite. She's like her dad. So she came to me and is like, I love math problems. Give me math problems. I mean, literally, it's like, okay, 4 times 6, what is that? She loved it. She's like, give me problems. And I went to the teachers and I'm like, hey, what can we do for her? Is there any enrichment? And they're like, oh, well, she can take this exam. And if she does well, there'll be some enrichment programs that we can do. So she took the exam, scored really high charts. And then the school said, oh, we'd love to put her in this enrichment program, but we don't have the funds. Sorry. And you know what? Miss Ringham, she's fine. Don't worry about her. She's fine. And this, I'm gonna, we can go off on another tangent about public schools and everything, but I tried so hard to improve the school to help with this, to be like, okay, if Madison's one of these kids, there's got to be others. How do we do this? And I'm all for not leaving any child behind, but there are some kids, what do you do when they want to excel and they're not given any tools to help them, right?
And I have
And
it,
so at
you and
that,
I have talked about this because I have it with all three of mine. So each
yeah.
of them have,
And
and it's hard for them because they're like, no, I want to learn, I want to learn, I want to learn. And it's like, they're like, wait, slow down. You need to, the other kids have to catch up. Some kids never catch up. So it's that I
or
totally understand.
Yeah, or it could be the reverse. Maybe, your kid does need help and the school's not there for them. And
Either way,
so
you're
both
absolutely
scenarios, I just went, I need to go back to work. I need to be funding extracurricular stuff for her to do. And also maybe she needs to go to a private school. Wink, wink, maybe the school I went to, which holy shit, that's going to cost a ton of money. I need to, somehow help her with this. And so that was my driving force is I want a better life for my kids, and this one child, even though she's not coming to me as a second grader saying, Mommy, can I go to a private school? She wasn't saying that. And we went through public school. We stayed at the public school. We tried as hard as we could, but that was the aha moment that I'm like, I need to go back to work.
yeah, it's the catalyst for you to know you knew it was the
Well, go back to paid work, I should
go back
say,
to yeah, go
right?
back to paid work. So
Yeah.
how did you? So then, how did you network? Because you already had all these relationships. So did you then network with people you knew? How did you land where you did next?
So you would think I worked at Adobe, I worked at Apple. I'm Ursula, like a network. I've got tons of friends. And also, all these people I'd worked with over the years for a decade, they had gone on to Google, to Yelp, to Yahoo, all these different companies. And you would think, oh, not a problem. I could get a job. Guess what? No, they're all like, Ursula, you haven't worked for 8 years. Nothing I had done with leading this, alumni association. No, that's volunteer. Nothing I'd done in the classroom. No, that's volunteer. Even a
What
soccer coach. No.
like did you ever was there a point where you're like all this is transferable skills to me. Obviously, you and I know, but did you ever go, my God, I made a mistake? Or did you just go, you know what, I'm going to find something because I have
I kept saying I'm going to go find something. I'm going to figure it out. I'm
never
going to
gave
figure
up.
it out.
You were
I
committed.
never gave up. And so what happened was I would just keep talking to people. I would keep just putting it out there, call people. And the thing was, even for me, even though back my first job in high tech was taking those phone calls from random people, to reach out to someone and be like, hi, I'm looking for a job. I mean, obviously you wouldn't do it like that. that was tough.
Yeah.
That was really tough to be like, I got to put now this hat on that I haven't had for 8 years, getting back into the mix. And then also like the imposter syndrome of like, do I even think I can do this? You
Yes.
know, there was a lot of like
Fear.
self-doubt, but I would keep being like, no, you need to keep going.
And it's
And
different. I'm
so,
going to do the caveat of like now today, people are not ashamed to go on LinkedIn and go, I just got let go. I'm in a transition. People post, come and help me, and network support
yeah,
each other.
that
That
wasn't the case.
we didn't have it
That
that at
wasn't the
that
case.
age. That was not an
No.
option.
That was
So
kind of an embarrassing thing. And also, like, I am proud to put on my LinkedIn profile, I was a stay-at-home mom. I think that's a story. And it actually is interesting because I'm always talking to people, right? And that's always an interesting, story to tell. So I kept talking to people, and we were on this one vacation, and we met this gentleman who owned a recruiting firm. And I'm like, recruiting, okay, you call people, you try to get jobs, whatever. And I'm like, I could do it. And he's like, just our conversation and me getting to know him over the week, our kids were all playing with each other. He's like, I like you. Let me give you a very, very small retainer. But it was at least like, wow, I'm bringing something in. I can go buy the groceries with this money. Um,
yeah.
he said, small retainer, and then you'll be on commission. And so I did that for about a year, and I did it just to put it on my damn resume. And I brought in probably about 5 or 6 jobs, which, it's not a lot, but it was something. And I did a great job. I learned everything about recruiting, what it took, how to negotiate. You had to put yourself out there. You're doing cold calls. Now it's different with recruiting, but it was very humbling because it's like, oh my gosh, I'm doing all these calls. What am I, what's the next paycheck going to be? What is it? And at least I did that. And then I also took on, I had friends that were like, hey, I need some help with like doing some marketing on this campaign. I'm like, I'll help you. Just like, it was just ridiculous, but just to say I could put that on my resume that I was doing
And I
something.
do want to add, like, I think you and I have seen kind of some of the younger generation, I'll say, that almost like discredit those like roles when it's beneath them. You and I have a
Oh,
different
no.
attitude. You and I have
Mm-mm.
had to roll up our sleeves and get dirty, get it done. And you and I never, there isn't a job I won't do. And you're identical to that. That I'm sure you gave it 150% going, this is I'm going to be happy and do this job to get to the next place. And I think that's
It,
another amazing attribute of you. Like, nothing's beneath you. You'll do it.
yeah, you can't,
That's a
yeah,
big
it's
thing.
such a good point because one thing will lead to another. And sometimes it's just to get your damn foot in the door. Maybe you're there for a year or two. Is it the most awesome job? Well, guess what? On your side hustle, then take classes, do, network with people to get to the next thing. Because you know what? Sorry to say, but in life, no one's just going to give you something. You have to earn it and you have to go after it.
And you don't know who you're going to meet there, and having the reputation of
Exactly.
giving it 150%. And that's what I think, not to discredit younger, the 20-year-olds, but they don't realize that if you're not professional, the network is also can be small where people are like, hey, she didn't give it 150%. And that's where it's like, I think everyone's looking at you no matter what that role is for you to be the best you can in it. And I think that's something you
Exactly.
do really well,
Yeah.
no matter what.
And and then so how I got to where I am today was I was doing the recruiting thing. I'm just kind of floundering. What am I doing? And I was on a girls' trip, and I was talking with some new acquaintance from the neighborhood, and I was telling them my story, like I'm trying to find a job. And
Mm-hmm.
this one woman stopped and looked at me and said, "Wait, I read your book." And this was something I didn't even mention.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I love your
When I was a stay-at-home mom, I'd always wanted to write that book. I wrote a fictional book, a high-tech thriller. You
and
can
it's on
find it on
Amazon.
Amazon.
It's
It's
a
on Amazon.
love it. I have to read it. I
I,
like I've seen
I
I'm like, oh my god, I have to buy it.
it's it's okay. Let's just say it's okay.
But you
I went
won't
off on
get
this
it.
because the
Wanted
whole
to
thing I didn't
read it.
well, the whole thing is like I didn't even preface this as, all the stuff I was doing when I stayed home. One of them was I was writing a book, I was going to writing classes, I was attending. I have a whole writer community out there. All these thriller mystery writers I still keep in touch with. I went to conferences for a good 5 to 6 years. I was learning the art because I'm like, I'm going to be that next John Grisham or whatever. So I did write a book, and I actually wrote another book. And my editor, I finally got an editor, and she was just like, well, let me preface. I've had editors before, but got an actual professional one who the one I wrote about is all about AI. It's fascinating. It's crazy that now AI is taken
Yeah,
off.
it's
But she
foreshadowing,
said,
really. Yeah.
yeah, so we'll have another discussion about that. But she's like, put that on the back burner. So I kind of did that because the books, I'm a good writer, but I wasn't writing. I wrote. how I thought people wanted to hear from me. And my editor was always on, you need to write for you. And that's where I'm not going to even go into detail about this. I'm looking at a nonfiction because my nonfiction writing is fantastic. That's what my editor says. And so I'm looking at doing that. But anyhow, I digress. Sorry, Lade. I'm all over the place.
That's okay.
Um,
No, but it is you had that as part of your I want to do these things and you did it. So that
yep.
led,
Yeah. And
that's
so this gal said to me, you wrote a book, you can write. And I said, of course I can. And she said, oh, I need someone as a contractor to come in and write some customer success stories. Have you ever written customer success stories for a software company? Of course I have. I had never done it, but I'm like, come on, how hard could it be? So, literally, unvetted, a month later, I stepped into the offices in Palo Alto of SAP. I had no idea what SAP was, had no idea what they did, but she brought me in as a part time contractor to write success stories. And it was one of those things where, I was intimidated. I was like, oh my God, what am I doing? And I
funny.
was
At the
juggling.
time, we're at the same, wasn't it the same size, right? It's not that far off from what you and I joined. The company was big. It's not like it was a small company.
No, this is big deal. This is a big
Yeah,
deal.
big.
And I remember juggling of like getting the kids in the morning, dropping them off at school. I would then race up to Palo Alto because when you're new, you like nowadays you can commute, you can telecommute, all that stuff, right? Work from home. But I
We didn't at
wanted to
that
build
time.
that bridge.
I want to say
Yeah,
like we didn't have that flex schedule. We went
we
into
didn't have the
office
flex schedule.
the kids
No.
to do work,
Yeah.
quickly leave to get. I mean, that's just what we did.
Yeah, and so I would like leave the kids at 8 in the morning, drive up to Palo Alto, and I'd stay there until I think it was like 2. I can't remember. And I had made a promise like I didn't want to start working again until my son was like in first or second grade, and I did that, which was great. Um, and so, transitioning, it was one of those things like I had to call the customer, I had to get the story out of them, and then I had to write it in a creative way. But I had an editor I worked with, and I remember the stakeholders on my team, they loved it because my writing was a little different. Remember, I was that fictional high-tech thriller. And so I'd write kind of just from an interesting perspective, but still get the story there and make it compelling that someone would want to keep reading past that first sentence and they'd keep reading past the second, the first paragraph and they'd keep going.
Well, and it's what
And
you said
so,
earlier, Ursula. Like you are a storyteller through and through, and that exuded. What you wrote was a story, and it's a storyteller. Because a lot of like customer
yeah,
reference stuff is so. It's like no, you told a story in a narrative, and that's part
yeah,
of your storytelling. So yeah,
yeah.
that part
But,
was a fabulous
but
role.
I'll tell you, silently, I was intimidated because everyone around me had been working, right? So you had people that, and what I mean by that is people that were my age but had been working for 20 years. There were people that were maybe 10 years younger but had been working for 10 years.
Yeah.
And I'm in this environment where I'm just like, who am I? I'm like totally tap dancing. I'm like, are they going to someday discover that I don't know what I'm doing? And like the stakeholders of my team, they would invite me, even though I was a contractor and part time, anytime they had like a offsite, we're like, let's go all have dinner and we're paying for it, or we're gonna have a team meeting. They included me. And I remember seeing these people and I thought they had their acts together. I'm like, wow, they've got their shit together. They know what they're doing. I'm like, what am I doing? I've got these kids. I'm trying to write these stories. And I thought they had it figured out. But you and I already know the truth, right? Do you think everyone has it figured out?
No.
No way. No way. No one has it figured out, right? But I'd
Well, and
say
it's
that that
having
was a,
well, and I think it's having yourself, no believing in yourself is so important because you and I've had many times where I'm that. You said it earlier, the imposter syndrome, where it's like someone's going to find out, like I don't know, whatever, and it's having the confidence in yourself, going, you know what? Once you just don't give up on yourself, then you're successful, and people look at you the way that you want them to look at you. And
exactly. And that's why I'm like, I mentor a bunch of people right now, and even, our intern on our team, where I'm like, no one has it 100% figured out. No one does. And I think Michelle Obama put it best that when she was in these meetings with these world leaders, right? Because she's there with President Obama, she's like, hey, they're just like everyone else. And some of them, they're stupider than you are. They have no idea. And it's how you present yourself and the authority you give. And I always say,
your
like,
value, like I think you
show
also
your value.
show
We
what
don't
you
show our value enough.
we don't show our value enough, and I think you can't having the confidence to go, you know what, no one's better in this than me, and this is
Yeah.
my sweet spot, and that's I think having that and knowing what you're really good at. Is now as
And
we're older, I now know I'm like, oh, these are things I'm good at, and these are things I'm not good at. And we have someone on our team that I think has great self confidence. I didn't have in my 20s. I didn't
yes.
have it. I've built it over the years to be like, you get that confidence, and I'm impressed when some 20-year olds are like, oh, I can do all this, and it's like, wow, I didn't have that. You know.
But I'll tell you what happened then with confidence was I've been working for about a year, part time, sometimes maybe three quarters time. And my VP took me into the office and she's like, hey, do you know something about social media? I'm like, of course I do.
Yeah.
How'd I? I mean, I'd limited success with my book and I'd used social media and I'd gotten a presence on Twitter and things like that. But did I really know it?
No.
So she said to me, well, these two interns are leaving for the summer. They've been managing our small and mid-sized enterprise accounts, small business accounts. Do you think you could take that over? Absolutely. I don't I should ask her one day. She's no longer with SAP. Why she decided to come and ask me. Because she had said, I looked at your resume, you worked at Adobe and Apple, you can do more, can't you? And I said, yes. And so that is what led to where I am today, where basically I went into this, they brought me on full time to SAP by then. I was given, here's a Twitter account, LinkedIn, do something with it. I think at the time it had like 1,000 followers. And so I dove in. I learned everything I could about social media. And this was at the time when I didn't have an agency. I was by myself. So I had to write the tweets. I had to write the LinkedIn posts. So I had to learn how to rewrite. I'm a good writer, but when you have to learn how to write in 130 characters or fewer, you have to write very differently. And then in addition, it's not just putting out social posts, you got to create content. What kind of content are you going to create? And that's when then I created this internal program. I just thought, okay, I'm going to create this program called Amp It Up. Back then, SAP loved to have a name for a program called Amp It Up. And what we did was I had for the small and mid-size, I had like three or four executives around this topic. And I'm like, okay, every month you're going to write a blog and you're each going to promote each other's blogs. And we're going to put this on our, I was also managing a website. Can you believe that? That was another thing they gave me. They're like, can you manage the small and mid-sized enterprise section of the SAP website? Sure, I can. I mean, I had, managed the developer website for Apple, but this is different. And so my point is like, I just started doing things and my stakeholders really liked what I was doing. And so they let me fly. So I would be the innovator. I'd be like, oh, live streaming, let's try that. Let's try live streaming. Let's try podcasting. Let's do this. Let's work with influencers. And I started to then build up this reputation. And when I would go to teams and ask them, because I didn't have any budget, I would show them the results of what I had done and show them what we could do. And they instantly then trusted me. And then we'd work on a program together. And I think by the time I left that job, I think I said we started with like 1,000 followers on our social channels. It was at least 25,000 between all the different channels we had. It was pretty amazing opportunity that I had when I was doing that for
Well,
5 years.
well, and I think also you said earlier, part of what I think is another great attribute of yours is you see the market, you see what's, you read a lot, you know where it's going. And I think tying that into your daily job to be like, we need to do this, here's the narrative, and here's what the market wants, and having that creativity is so important in these roles because you're thinking ahead. You're almost like, oh, okay, we're here, we need to be there. And I think that's really important for these type of roles.
It is, and I think that's one of the superpowers of our collective team that we're in right now is, we just had our team huddle where I'm on everyone to share something they've seen and we learn from each other. We're like, "Oh my God, I didn't see that. I didn't see that." And it's all around culture and social media and thought leadership and what's happening. And if you don't share that or learn about it, you're never going to, innovate in what you're doing and never move your career forward because you always have to keep moving forward.
No, I definitely agree. And my God, I can talk to you forever, but I want to ask you a few more questions.
Oh, sorry. I know. Here we are. I've been
No,
babbling
no,
on
no,
again,
no.
again, again.
No, I could talk to you. We can. There's 1,000 more topics I want to talk to you about. But you mentioned earlier, and one of the things I mentioned that you inspired me to is your love for outdoors and adventure. And I do want to mention, like, you have incredible children, but your daughter's like incredible with skiing, and I want you to mention that. But you also do a good job of juggling your adventure side. You just came back from a hike, and like you make sure, and you're busy. I want to say that you have a lot on your plate, but you make time for you and health and traveling and adventure. How do you do it? Because that's the hard part. Like the first thing most people do is like, I can't work out today, I can't do this, and it's you don't. You make time for the healthy part. an adventure side? How do you do it?
Well, it comes back to what I said before. We only have one life, you have to live it. And not getting into too much details, but I've had some health issues that make you question your life on this planet and how long you're going to be here, and you better enjoy it. And mind you, even when I was younger, I always had a thirst to go and explore and meet new people and just wanting to see the world. And so that was ingrained in me. And then my father was someone who played football in high school. And long story short with him, and he is a separate podcast. He was plucked out of obscurity from a very lower income family. He was never going to be able to afford to go to college, and he got a full ride scholarship for football and academics at Harvard. Totally changed our family. But he was always big into sports and encouraging us. Never that crazy parent that's like, you got to do this. It was just always, oh, you want to play soccer? Let's go. I saw you playing with your brother. Let's go. And he was always the dad. He had a flexible schedule because he owned his own business. He was in real estate development, where he would come and be on the sideline and cheer me on in my soccer games, right? And so I always am encouraging,
And you were
that
around a
healthy.
lot of sports. Like you just naturally are like, you've done all these different things, which is amazing.
I'm very lucky that I can pick up anything, but now with age comes the past surgeries have slowed me down. So what I have to do is pick and choose. So I don't play soccer anymore. I can't do that. I quit cold turkey 12 years ago, or 14 years ago, and it devastated me because I've been playing soccer since I was 7. But I do other things. I do mountain biking, I do road biking, I do hiking, I do skiing, and my whole thing is, again, you have one life to live, you better do it. And I've kind of shown that with my kids. Like, I never force them to do anything, but my daughter is really taken off. And I have to tell you, her experience on why she's a runner. She loves to run, but then she's a skier also, and that's another story. But her freshman year in high school, it was because she had a great coach. And the coach sat down with the girls and talked to them about health and wellness, and here's how you can eat well. She eats so healthy, and it's because she had that one mentor, that one woman who stopped to talk and say, hey, it's okay if you want to be athletic and to eat. Because so many times with girls at that age, when they're 13, 14 years old, they're told the wrong thing. And so, it's a combination of things. But, for
Well,
me,
I love that
health
you
and
mentioned,
wellness
yeah,
is a
you're the
priority.
man.
I make it a priority. I
Well,
always have to be active.
well, and it's interesting. So my father went to University of Pennsylvania. So interesting scenario, but he made my sister and I do every sport. He said, you might not be a champion, you might not be an Olympic player, but I can play tennis, I can do golf, I can ski, I can skate, I can. He just was learn everything and figure out what makes you
Yeah.
happy. And part of his
Yeah.
DNA was waking up and riding a bike and then swimming. And his whole day was around physical fitness.
Yeah.
And he was an orthodontist, so it's like, but I love that your dad also instilled in you like that, you know, to do the sports. And my dad was always in every competition. I was horrible in a lot of things, but it was, I can do everything average. But I love it because someone says, you want to play racquetball? Sure, I can do.
You can go do it.
And that I
And
think is
and
something our fathers did really well for us, you know?
and I always laugh. I joke with my kids. I'm like, you need to be able to do these things in case there's a zombie apocalypse and you can just run and run faster and run away. But but
That's
it,
really
but
true.
but I'll tell you, Elaine, it's like today people will be like, "What?" But it's like I got up early before work and I did a bike, just
Yeah.
the Peloton, and then I did at lunch I did a hike, and then after this I have a couple more work calls, and then my daughter and I are going to go paddleboarding. Yeah, it's funny because you look like, where am I? You're probably like,
Oh
Ursula.
yeah, like
You're. It
you're
looks
in
like
Kenya.
you're in a camp, your summer camp, because I got these bunk beds. But this is in my kids' room. I'm up in the mountains.
I
I have a
love
place up here, and we're gonna go paddleboarding at the end of the day.
I love it.
And
So
so
you've done
I
my
always have to
sister did
do
one of those.
something.
You do three of those, but I do want to give you credit for that because I know you're happier after. I know when you do the physical activity
Oh
and you're
yeah,
outdoors. I know when there's days where it's raining and you're more like it changes your whole, but it changes your whole physique and your whole
it
you
does.
know your kind of your whole mood. So I want to I have two more questions for you. I'd love to know, what is your advice for someone getting into high tech? You mentor a lot of people. We talked about networking, but it's sometimes hard to get your foot in the door. What is something you would give some advice if someone wants to get in the high tech world?
I mean, the continuous networking, and I know that. People are like, duh, of course, Ursula, of course I need to do that, but you need to. And I'm going to give an example of our intern Bella, who is now in the company. I was shopping locally in my neighborhood at a woman's boutique. I love it, Bella James.
Mhm.
Remember, our intern is named Bella. And when I was there, this young gal started helping me, and I just asked, what's her name, Bella? And I'm like, okay, she's the owner's daughter, whatever. We're just talking, and I noticed that she just had this, elevated sense of just. It was just amazing for sales. She was authentic, honest, just like, here, let's try this on. Let's get over here. Let's get this. And I was like, there's something about this woman. And we just start talking, and I'm like, oh, have you graduated? She's like, I'm about to graduate. And I said, "Oh, what are you interested in?" And she's like, "Internet, influencer relations." And I'm like, to myself, I'm like almost falling in the ground, but I didn't go into detail. I just continued to talk to her. And long story short, when I walked out of that store, I had her contact. I'd given her my contact information and said, "Send me your resume." I said, "I'm just intrigued. I don't have anything right now, but by then she knew I worked at SAP and I was head of global influencer marketing." Long story short, we ended up getting a position open. I had all of my team interview her because I didn't want to be biased. I wanted to be like, was this the right move? And in the end, we all decided we love her. We want to bring her in. She's a rock star. And my point is just her being herself and talking to people. And I know a lot of people go, Ursula, I do that all the time. But you never know where something's going to happen. And that's why I also said, besides networking, read, watch, and listen to everything, because there might be a trigger. There might be something that you don't even realize that you're associated with. And you have to be able to make that next step and don't feel embarrassed or ashamed of like, oh, I have to call someone. Do it. I
Yeah.
have to email someone. Do it. Just
And meet
because
some.
no one's going to do it for you. I'm sorry. There's a generation of kids that mommy and daddy have done everything. And there's going to be a lot of kids that they get their whole career by mommy and daddy. I'm sorry. My kids, you've got to do it yourself.
Yeah.
There's a time where I've now cut it off. You can't do it. You have to
No,
do it.
and I think you and I always said, and we taught the some of our team members, every time we meet with someone, link in with them. LinkedIn is
Yep.
such a great community that it's for everyone. And then you meet someone and they remember you and they see your profile and you can still keep connecting with them. And that's, I think, a huge network piece too.
Yep.
You and I can talk about. I mean, I look at the time and I'm like, oh my god, I could talk to you
I
forever.
know. I
So
know.
I love. There's other conversations I want to have with you. I want to leave you with one question. So, what
Oh,
empowers you, and what inspires you, Ursula?
that is a stumper. What inspires me? Oh my gosh. Because I'm one of these people, I'm not like when someone's like, who's your hero? I'm like, oh, I don't have any heroes because everyone will disappoint. What inspires me is opportunity.
Yeah.
There's opportunity around the door everywhere, and even within yourself. There's some things personally I'm working on right now, and I'm getting excited because I'm finally realizing there is opportunity, or so there is some things you can do in this area. And I get most inspired because we are the luckiest people in the world to live in this country that we live in. I know I don't want to get into politics and all this crap, but we have the freedom as a woman that I can be like, hey, I want to try something different or new. I want to, start my own business. There are women out there that do today have so much more opportunity to do things than we ever did in our parents' generation, our mom's generations, all of that. And so I'd say what, you know, empowers me, inspires me is just the possibility of the opportunity to do something.
Yeah.
That's what really affects me and keeps me going each day.
I love it. And you inspire me every day. I feel
Oh,
like
thank
that,
you.
it's I think not many people have an opportunity to work with someone like you and to have someone that, you look up to but is a partner and you can learn from and bounce ideas off of, and having that inspiration every day. I think the whole team and so many other people would say the same. That's a gift because having that, you really exude it. And I'm just so happy you're in my inner circle and work and everything else. But you are truly
Awesome.
inspiring. I can't wait to see what you do next. And I'm going to end this, Her Stories, and we're going to have Ursula back another time. And thank you, Ursula, so much for your time and joining Her Stories today.
Thank you, Elaine. Bye, everyone.